building the best version of yourself, becoming a for-profit business as an employeepreneur, and learning how to become irreplaceable, and much more, all on this episode of the Take Back Your Career podcast.
You need to take action, and you're about to get real-world information and insight for fixing your career. This is the Take Back Your Career podcast with your host, Adam Fullerton.
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the Take Back Your Career podcast, which is dedicated to helping professionals find happiness, fulfillment, and financial security in the work that they do. And we do this by interviewing real career coaches and experts who can provide actionable ideas, which can produce real results. And today we have on Jamie Carlstedt, who is the founder and career coach at Redstone Coaching, where he provides one-on-one coaching to business professionals. And he does this by providing training, strategy, and resources that can help you advance your career, advance your life, grow professionally, and make more money, which I think is, of course, one of the biggest pillars or goals of this podcast. Everybody, in my opinion, is looking to make more money. So I know that'll be a topic for us today in this interview. So Jamie, welcome to the podcast. Let me say thanks for being on, of course. Thanks for taking the time out of your schedule to do this. And I know I want to say, of course, ask you the question like I always do, how's it going? I know you recently moved to Colorado, which is a big change for you. So I want to say, hey, how was that, and how are things going on I guess the West Coast or the
the Midland?
Yeah, right.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, first off, thanks for having me. I'm really excited. Whoever's listening, I hope I'm here to serve you and hope I can add some value to your life. So yes, I did. I just moved out to Denver. So I'm originally from Michigan, grew up there, and then after college moved to New York. Was there for about a year and a half-ish, and then was in Chicago for a year. So kind of, I've had enough of the gray winters, wanted to go out to Denver, and it seriously is. It's like sunny 300 days a year.
Well, we're jealous. I'm very jealous. And you said you're from Michigan. I'm actually from Michigan, so I'll tell you right now, it's cold, it's dark, I don't like it, but at least one of us got out and is enjoying the beauty of the country and what it offers. So, hey, thanks again, like I said, for being on and, providing our listeners with real value. And I'm excited for this conversation. So I want to start off with just asking, I want you to kind of dive into your story. I want to, of course, ask why you got into career coaching and what you've helped your clients achieve, because I think it's important for listeners to hear success stories. And they say, I hear people that changed their career, they got a new job or transitioned or pivoted, whatever, but what does that mean to me as an individual listening? So I think, again, just success stories reinforce the fact that there's opportunity, there's an option out there. People can do something with the path that they're on. And so I would just like to, again, hear about your story and hear about how you help your clients become successful in their career.
Sure. Yeah. All right. So my background's finance. So if someone asks, what did you do professionally directly out of college? I was an investment banker at Goldman Sachs in New York City. I was there for about a year and a half, pivoted from there, decided that I wanted to do something different. But I think what's relevant for everyone listening is, and really for everyone, our experiences growing up determine what we're naturally interested in. Like when we're born, we don't know what we want to do when we're born. We just absorb whatever's around us from our parents, our friends, our professors, etc. So I know when I think back to why did I choose finance? Like I can think back to the moment, it was during the Great Recession. My parents were struggling with the finance stuff. And just as I was in middle school, saw the struggle, and I'm like, all right, money. Like this is the problem. I never want to have that a problem. If I can fix this for myself, for the family, etc. So going to college, I knew I wanted to do finance. I ended up networking with several business executives. All of them told me to major in accounting, not finance. And kind of their stereotype was you can do accounting and go into finance later, but if you do finance, you can't go into accounting, etc. So majored in accounting, focused on finance, and I was the first student from Michigan State to break into a network into Goldman in New York, and then actually in Goldman overall. And important note kind of here, I started doing the networking, training, the coaching, etc., all through Michigan State. And then actually by my senior year, I was being paid for it via scholarships. I was leading programs. So that was my first flavor of coaching. I loved it. And then graduated, moved to New York, was doing the banking. So I was on the debt capital markets team for financial institutions where I was working with bond issuances. I was working with revolving credit facilities. And it was super interesting work, very analytical for about the first 6 months. And then there was a plateau where I could visually see the hierarchy within. All right, I need to be in this analyst position 2 years. And the first 6 months were, I mean, they were super exciting. Learned a lot, grew a lot, and kind of the stereotype in banking is you're learning from a fire hose. Really was. But then it kind of plateaued. Was doing a lot of PowerPoints, and it became very, very repetitive. And even though I was working with different clients, the same type of analyses and work was repetitive. So they say you're doing something different every day, but you're doing the same type of work for different clients every day. So the traditional path for finance, if you go into banking, et cetera, is usually you do your 2 years and you either move up, and I would say only about a quarter of people in investment banking stay within banking, and kind of the rest flood out after 2 years, and they either go hedge funds or private equity or any other type of high level finance that still pays well. And I knew that I had an entrepreneurial bug, and my dad was in consulting. And so I was thinking, all right, maybe when I'm 30, I'll start my own finance firm or something like that. And then I just realized I didn't want to do that. And I knew I didn't want to do finance long term. And I love finance, but I didn't like the industry, that at least the way that path was structured. So was thinking back, all right, if I start my own business, what am I going to do? And I know I want to help people. I love working one-on-one. And I started thinking about what have I done in the past that I really, truly enjoyed? And it was the training, literally, that I was doing in college. So ended up deciding to leave, immediately started working with people. And back then it was very structured to just resume writing, networking, interview prep, get the job. Since then, I've expanded to where I now work with people. I almost think of it as 3 phases. There's let's figure out your life. So career clarity, personal performance, and, I can dig into that later if we want, but then personal development, that's kind of phase 1. Phase 2 is, all right, how do you actually transition your life and career? How do you advance it? Is that a new company? Is that moving up within your company? Building relationships. If you're not where you are right now, you need to do something about it. But before you know what to do, you got to figure that out. So phase 1's figuring it out, and then up leveling kind of your performance side. Step 2 or phase 2 is kind of actually doing it, making that transition. And then phase 3 is how do you take that money, and then how do you continue to build a financial freedom?
That's awesome. And I want to touch on 2 things. So one of my, based on what you just told us, of course, and one of the things that you said earlier, and of course I want to dive back into, again, the success stories that you've seen with your clients. I think it's really important for people to hear that everything is possible, and kind of your career life is what you make it, and you're not stuck. You're maybe your mindset is stuck, and you're just, again, I experienced this myself. I just didn't know what to do next. And so again, before jumping into that, something you said earlier is that, your experiences when you were younger kind of determines maybe what you get into or what your passion is, or what your interest is. I feel like, and maybe this is my experience, but I feel like, at least in my career before, and a lot of our listeners in their career, they really don't do anything to do with what they enjoyed when they were kids, or, when they were teenagers, or, they were told to go to school, go to college, of course, and, get a prestigious job or get a high paying job, be in finance or become a doctor or whatever.
Consulting.
Exactly. And a lot of people then do it, and then they've gotten stuck because they said, I really don't like what I do. And of course, we've talked on other episodes, and we can talk about this as much as we want, but they've kind of, whether they've pigeonholed themselves or they've gotten so far into their career that, they have financial obligations and they don't think they can pivot. So they're, feeling stuck or miserable again. But again, the point I'm trying to make here is that a lot of people really just don't do something that drives them and excites them. And that's why they're stuck, and that's why they're unhappy, and maybe why they're not making as much money as they want. So I think it's just interesting what you said. And, when you grow up as a kid, I want to be a firefighter. I want to be an astronaut, whatever it is. But then kind of real life maybe sets in, or expectations, or the society, culture, with parents, whatever it might be, kind of says, nope, you should go down this path. And then people do that, and then they sit behind the computer potentially and just hate what they do.
Well, a couple of points there. So I think one is, who are we learning from? And this is something that I, after doing thousands of hours of research, and I've now worked with over 100 plus people individually, but it's amazing to think back on, one, my own personal experiences, but then 2, to see this play out with people who I've worked with in their 20s, as well as people in their 50s. I've worked with college students. I've worked with people who are recent graduates. I've worked with people who are early to mid-career, so call that 5 to 10 years. I've worked with people who are global senior executives running multi-$100 million companies across continents. They still have the same problem. People think it's just the 20-year-olds that have the problems. They don't. I'll never forget, there's a conversation or client that I was working with, and she was extremely successful by society's means. She had more than enough money than she could ever want, need, or could use. And literally, she pretty much just told me, like, jokingly, she said, I don't know what I want to be when I grow up. And she was early 50s. And she's got 10 to 15 years. She has all the money she could want. And she was like, finally, I spent 20 years doing something that I was growing, but I didn't actually enjoy it. It was doing the work, getting paid, and moving up within the structure. But she finally hit the point where she had the reflection where, oh my God, I don't enjoy what I do. And I don't want to spend the rest of my career doing that, which is the 10 to 15 years. So if you're in your 20s or 30s, people, and I work with a lot of people in their 20s and 30s, but they think that they're the only ones with the problems. It's just that the people in the 40s and 50s have given up on making changes because they have so much responsibility. They have kids, they have family, they have insurance, they have mortgages, they have student educations coming up. So it's not that they don't have the problem. It's that they feel that they can't even make the change anymore.
Sure. Or maybe it's just easier to not try to make a change. Let's just accept where I am. And you know what, 5 to 10, 15 years, like you said, I can trudge through this and just, I can make it through it. What's another 5, 10 years when I've been doing this for 30, 40 years, which is unfortunate. Yeah. And I think one of the pillars of this podcast is about fulfillment. And I know we touched on this, and this is kind of to your point in your story you just mentioned of your client. But people, again, I guess it comes down to what you're looking for in life. And a lot of people think that if I had more money, then I'm going to be so much happier in my career. And people kind of chase the money instead of chasing the goals that they have for their life, which is something we're going to get into. Kind of figure out what you want to do in life and then figure out how your career helps you get there. But in your story, it sounds like the lady had the money but didn't have the fulfillment. And people always think they don't maybe think that they just try to chase the money, and then maybe 20, 30, 40 years they say, shoot, I should have chased what drove me, what the passion was, what fulfillment could have been, instead of facing the money and getting pigeonholed potentially later in life, I guess.
Yeah. Well, and one of the points earlier, so you talked about, or we were talking about kind of the finance, banking, doctor, et cetera. It's one of the craziest things that I've seen, and just a realization, again, for myself, like everything that I now work with people on, I've been through myself. I've been to the dark places. I came out of the dark places. Now I'm doing, what I truly believe will be the work that I do for the rest of my life. But a lot of people, we grow up K through 12, we're taught that you need to get an education because you need to get a job, and you need a good paying job because you want a lot of money, and you want a lot of money because that's how you're going to be happy, comfortable, sure, complacent. You can buy luxury, you can do whatever you want. The craziest kind of counterintuitive point is that's totally flipped. It's totally backwards. And I've researched, I don't even know how many people know, probably over 100 of who are the billionaires, who are the people, the most successful people in the world. And not just in terms of business, but politics, sports, religion. And then, of course, you have the many, many different areas of business, whether it's advisory services, whether it's product, or if it's innovation and technology. But like all of those people, because they genuinely loved what they did, they brought a lot more energy. They were willing to work harder, and their brain didn't turn off. So most people literally are doing something that they're making decent money. Hopefully they're making decent money. And if they're not, they're even more miserable. But there's a lot of people who make good money. I saw a lot of bankers, a lot of consultants, a lot of people who make good money, and they are high achieving people. I mean, if you were to ask them, are you an achiever? They say, yes, absolutely. And the thing is they're in these high performing jobs, but they're still only doing about 110%. They're achievers. So of course they're going to beat expectations. But I also, after I got to know these people, I'm like, you're capable of 300% and you're stuck at 110. And I know that your brain's turning off at 8 p.m., 9 p.m., 10 p.m., midnight, whenever you're stopping working. But then you're also your brain's not continuing to work on the weekends. They're not reading about it. They're not continuing to advance their understanding knowledge. But when you genuinely love or are excited too, because a lot of people say passion, love, etc. It's kind of like, are you naturally interested? And the way that I love to express this to people is, can you think about it, talk about it, learn about it, and read about it, and it's not work?
Yeah.
Because you will naturally keep going on the weekends.
Absolutely. And something that just came to my mind, I heard this once, and hopefully I don't butcher it, but when you introduce yourself to someone, or you're at a party or a dinner or whatever it is, and someone asks, what do you do? Like, what do you do for work or whatever? And people always just say the job. They always say, I'm an accountant. But what do you do? And people, I'll say this completely honest. I would always say, I'm in marketing, because I didn't want to kind of dive into what I really did, because it wasn't that fun. It wasn't that exciting. It wasn't worth talking about. Like, nobody was going to hear what I did and say, "Whoa, that's really cool. Tell me more." Like, I was just going to bore people for sure. And so I tried to be like, no, let's just keep it high level. Let's just marketing, and then maybe if they're interested, they can ask more. But I don't say I was embarrassed, but I also just didn't feel confident. I didn't feel happy with. I didn't feel proud. That's what it comes down to. Nothing. Yeah. What I did didn't excite me. To your point, I didn't love it. It's just something that I did. And again, that's based on what we talked about just a little bit ago, where I went to college and said, I like business. Marketing sounds cool. And I've grown to love it. Right. And I've grown to love it a lot more. But I've also learned through my own career the power of marketing and everything else. And now that drives me much more. So. I want to jump back really quick, and not to cut you off on what we were just talking about, but I want to jump back to those success stories. I want our listeners to say, okay, we understand who Jamie is. Jamie sounds like he's got some good ideas, a good head on his shoulders. How have you worked with clients? Tell me maybe one or two stories of clients who maybe have felt stuck and have been in the shoes of our listeners, where they feel, again, miserable. They're not making enough money. And what do we do with these listeners? And of course, one of the pieces of or topics of this entire conversation is approaching it from like life first, life goals, first, and then how does your career help you achieve those goals? So if you don't mind sharing a story or two and covering that topic, and have a conversation about that.
Yeah, for sure. So immediately, kind of one of the people that popped into my mind was someone who was 2 years out of college, and they were background in finance. So they graduated in finance, and then they immediately started working at a mortgage company. So they were at a mortgage broker, they were working, and so it was management was a problem. So they had, they weren't excited about the manager, just to put it lightly. And then the other thing was the work was extremely repetitive, wasn't being challenged, and pretty much was doing the exact same thing every day with no insight into what the future looked like. So it could be in that position for another year. It could be 3 years. I mean, there was such a lack of structure that there was no understanding of what that future would look like. So the very first part is understanding, and this is for everyone too. It's not about what you do. It's how are you applying that to something you actually care about. All right, I'm a marketer. I'm a finance person. Great. What are you marketing? What are you helping with finance? What are you planning the finances for? It's like when someone say, I'm an athlete. Sweet. What sport do you play? It's not every athlete loves every sport. Not every marketer loves every company. Mm-hmm. Not every finance person loves every company. And I think that's the first biggest kind of distinction that when I work with someone and I help them understand is, don't define yourself by what you do. Define yourself by how are you applying your skills, your knowledge, and your resources into an outcome, a mission, an advancement, an opportunity, something that you actually care about. Because it's kind of like when someone loves, if someone's excited about a personal goal that they have, sometimes they'll get through the hard parts. They'll work the extra hours. They'll do it because it's for them. Yep. They care about it. But the moment you lose the fact that you care about something, you're dependent on someone else forcing you to do it. Your boss is expecting you to work from 9 to 5. You have expectations. You'll meet those expectations because the stakes and the penalty for not doing that. All right, now you lose your income, you lose your lifestyle, etc. So you are never going to be the best version of yourself. Instead, the way to think about it is, I always fall to the lowest version of myself that I'm willing to accept. And for a lot of people, that's complacency. And it's because they don't care about what they're actually working on.
Yeah. And like you said, I mean, this is sustainable for only so long because, again, like we've talked about, if you don't have that driving factor, that driving force, and we've talked about this on previous episodes, but, your why, then it's only going to drive you for so long, and it's only going to get you so far before you just burn out because you say, I don't want to do this anymore, or this isn't what I'm interested in. And like you said earlier, you're giving 110% when you can give 300%. And, I think that that's obviously possible for anybody to do in any sort of situation or career path or position or company. But of course, you have to make sure that that company, and like talked about earlier, that mission aligns with what you're trying to accomplish in your own life. Because otherwise, like I just said, it's gonna burn you out. And I think one thing that you touched on earlier is that people who sit there and say there's no clear path, like I got to be in this position for maybe 2 years, 3 years, there's no real structure. I think that's something that our listeners, and we've talked about before, is that's an opportunity for our listeners to say, hey, if you're in a situation where there's no clear path for your growth, and maybe you do like what you do, but you're like, I still want to grow. I still want to make more money. I still want to, pursue happiness in this company or in this position, but there's no clear path, then that's a problem. And there's options that you can take, of course, which is asking your manager or your boss, like, hey, let's get structure around this, or leave to somewhere that does have structure. You can't just sit there and say there's no plan. You are in charge. You have to say, I know what I want to do in my life. How does this position help me get there? And if there's no path for that position to get you to where you're looking to get, then you got to make a change. You have to make the change and force the change, as far as I'm concerned.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I mean, the way that I love kind of the mindset shift that I am adamant when I work with someone on this is, think of yourself not as an employee. You don't work for a company. You chose to work for the company, and you chose to stay there. You can also choose to leave. So it's the biggest mindset shift I think that someone can have about their economic/career plan is you are an economic return. Like, you are a business, you're a service provider, and you have skills, you have knowledge, you are making money at that company because you have these skills and knowledge. You can do that at any other company and make money doing that. So the moment you see yourself as a for-profit business, you start to realize, okay, yes, I like my manager, but should my loyalty stop me from doing what's best for my life? Absolutely not. And just because you love your manager, or maybe you dislike your manager very strongly, either way, a for-profit business is going to keep its interest in line. And of course, it's going to, be respectful and work well with its clients and serve whoever their client is. But for you, the business will always still maintain its goals. So for a lot of people, it's, if you don't have structure, well, you need to build your own structure. And if that's not the company, well, tough. You're going to need to figure out what's the next move, because you don't want to just sit and stay. No business stays stagnant. They're either losing money or making money. And so when someone says, well, I'm just going to stay here for a while, well, one, you're not improving yourself. So automatically that's a negative. But then also the opportunity cost of, if you were at somewhere else for a year or two and you did love what you do, or you were excited about it, or at least you were growing different skills, knowledge, or experiences, either way, you're better off. And going back to my own kind of experience of why did I leave early? Because I left after about 1.5 years in banking. I mean, most people stay 2 years, but the decision I had to make is, all right, I'm making great money. And to think of how old I was and the money I was making was ridiculous. And the decision I had to make was, okay, do I just stay because the money's good? Or do I want to actually start working towards what I want for my life? And I ended up realizing that the time and the opportunity cost of what I could be learning and how I could be developing myself in that remainder 6 months, if you will, that was so much more valuable to me than the money. And when you're young, you can take risk. If everything fell apart, well, I've still got 30, 40 years to make up for it.
Absolutely. It's important. I mean, it's one of those things that if you try to get things on track in the beginning, 1%, I've said this in another episode before, but 1% off in the beginning, if you don't course correct quick or, soon in the process or your journey, that 1% can turn into 100% by the end. And then you're sitting there saying 20 years down the line, I don't like anything I do. I don't like any of this. But again, you're pigeonholed, you're stuck, whatever it might be. You don't think you can pivot, or you just got to work a lot harder. And so it's good to just do those course corrections. And the term that I like to use describing what you talked about, someone being kind of in control and seeing themselves as a for-profit business, as someone who's an expert and kind of commands their situation and what they offer to a business. I just call it being an employeepreneur, which is a tricky word for me to say, but employeepreneur, someone who is an employee. They're not looking to be an entrepreneur, or maybe they will one day. It doesn't matter. But point is, there's someone who says, I'm in charge. I'm running my career as a for-profit business, for example, and I'm going to be, again, in charge. I know what I'm worth. I know what the value is of my position or my skills or expertise, and I'm going to command the situation instead of the company commanding the situation for me.
Yeah. And so kind of going with that too. So talking about how some people feel like, oh, well, this 1%, I've taken that now over 10 years and now I'm stuck. This is the only experience I have. I only have these skills. I only have this knowledge. I think also a huge reframe that a lot of people, when they first hear it, they don't really believe it, but it is absolutely true. And I've now seen it so many times over and over and over again. And one specific example is there's someone that I'm actually, all right, well, I'm not going to say, someone I previously worked with, they were a background in equity, and they're interested in building a career that is the transition would require moving into debt or a credit focus. Well, he thinks that, well, based on my background, all I have is equity. I only have equity experience. I don't have the experience that they're looking for. And this is regardless. It could be marketing. It could be maybe I have industry experience and I can't move to that industry, or maybe I have a specific skill set that has served me well here, but I don't know if that will in another industry or another company. If you are just like everyone else, your value and your outcomes and your thinking, your creativity is going to be exactly like everyone else. So it's actually, I think there's kind of two kind of background paths. One is a linear background, and then the other one is nonlinear. A linear is when, for example, you've been in a creative marketing agency, you've continued to move up, and now you have 5 or 10 years of creative marketing agency experience. Well, if you don't want to have the advertising career path anymore or the agency experience, well, then move corporate, and now you're within their marketing plan. So that's a very linear background. But you could have someone who, let's say, has a background in accounting or finance or something and decides, I don't want the rest of my career to be accounting or finance. I would love to move into something more creative like marketing or corporate development or anything like that. Because you have those skills and background, or those skills and knowledge and experiences, a lot of people think that they don't have the experience, so they can't get the job. It's actually the opposite. You sell the fact that you're not like everyone else. You sell the different skills and the different knowledge. And of course, you're going to have to do some personal development to get the additional skills. I like to say that like 60 to 70% of you will transfer. You need to fill the other 30 to 40% through reading books, taking online courses, working with coaches, literally just any way of developing yourself. But it's usually an advantage because all the other applicants in the interview process at the other companies, they all have the traditional linear background. The moment you bring something different, you offer diversity, you offer creative thinking. As long as you sell it properly and you have to position it that way, you will open doors that you never imagined that you could open.
That's awesome. And I think that's just something that our listeners can use and can learn from, and can realize that if they grow those skills, if they differentiate themselves, if they have a new take or they're a unique look on things, that companies are going to want to hear that. They're going to be interested in it. And again, it's about how you frame it. And that's, of course, resumes and everything else that we're not going to dive into in this conversation, I don't think. But, framing it in your own mind is huge. It's important to say, I can't do this. I don't have this. I'll never be able to do this, and say, no, I do offer this. Here's what this company might be looking for, and how can I offer different perspective, and how can I, of course, offer some skills, but also, we talked about this before in other episodes, but attitude. How can I say, hey, I might not have exactly what you're looking for, everything checked off on the list, but I have a go-getter attitude. This is what I'm extremely passionate about. I know that if I transition or pivot into this or take on this type of role, I know I'm going to deliver because this is something exciting for me, and I know it's going to drive me, and I know that it's going to be a great relationship between you and the company.
Yeah. And kind of one of the thoughts that just hit me too is if there's any skill that I could recommend, literally anyone in any field, if you're an engineer, and I've worked with lots of engineers, I've worked with people in business and technical
Can I guess
positions. Go for it.
I'm going to say sales.
Yes, and that bleeds into two others.
Oh, okay.
So I like to group them. All together.
Yeah,
so
feel free.
Sales, influence, and negotiation. If you look at who are the most respected, the most well paid, as well as the people who are able to continuously get what they want in life, whether personally or professionally, they know how to sell, they know how to influence, and they know how to negotiate, which naturally makes you a leader. Now, of course, that's where ethics and morality come in, because you can use those skills in really good or really bad ways. Just like you can have money and use it in an incredible way, or you can use it in horrible ways. That's the individual, the ethic code and the morality of someone that will determine how those skills are used. But I like to think of those as amplifier skills. And I also like to tell people that a lot of people, especially in college, we think that, all right, I need to, and I thought this too, I need to be the best financial modeler possible. I need to understand the technicalities better than anyone. Well, there's always going to be the people who are just like you, focusing on the technicals. But the hardest part in literally anything is working with people, because it's so complex and getting people to change their mind is so difficult. So there's a technical skill ceiling. The moment, and the example I like to give, this is no shade to accountants, but if someone is doing tax prep, or if someone is keeping the books, or if someone is doing reporting, if you leave, they're just going to replace you, because they can find other people who can do the reporting, who can do the tax prep, who can whatever. And there's similarities like that in everywhere. I mean, even think of even extremely high paid positions. If you're a dentist, well, you're still pretty much paid for a very high paying skill in terms of a technical skill. But if you have one dentist that you really, really like, and then you have one dentist who's a total, anyways, that dentist that you really like could charge a higher price, and you're going to stay with that dentist because of the soft skills, the relationship building, the sales, the influence. And so, but now let's assume that you don't know either dentist. You've never, you just moved somewhere, and there's two dentists. Well, if one dentist is going to charge $300, and I'm just using ridiculous numbers, but $300 in one, and then $50 for the other, assuming no quality issues, who would you go to?
That's a good. Sorry, I was
I
was thinking it was rhetorical. You're going to go to the person that's worth $50.
Yeah, and usually the question in your head is, why is it so cheap?
Right.
And you're probably going to go find other people and ask them, hey, did it work out? Was anything wrong with your mouth? But if there are no problems, you're going to pay $50. Why? Because why would I pay more to have my tooth fixed? And a lot of people find themselves with limitations in their careers where they hit a technical skill ceiling and they can't continue to advance into leadership positions, management positions, or make more money because they're replaceable. The way to become irreplaceable is maximize. Of course, you need to have the technical foundation. You can't be a great accounting manager if you don't understand accounting. You can't be a great financial manager or a marketing manager or an operations manager. You need to understand the technical skills, but that's not where most of your value comes from. It's being able to understand the technicality, come up with creative solutions to complex problems, but then also if you can manage and influence people better than everyone else around you, you will always succeed over everyone else, regardless of technical skill.
That's awesome. And so then I want to ask you, one of my questions is going to be for our listeners who are saying, okay, cool, I know I have to increase each of these skills. How do I do that? Where do I start? What are the resources? How do I do this?
For sure. So and again, I had to go through that process too, because my background was extremely technical. It was all finance and accounting. And I knew nothing about sales. I knew nothing about influence. It has to start with understanding just the philosophy of it. And I dislike using the words philosophy or manifest or anything like that because they become so cliche. But if you don't understand the underlying principles of psychology, why do people do what they do? Why do people make decisions? And then, so for example, a principle of sales or influence is self-interest. A lot of people say, oh, well, all right. So for example, sell me this pen. People immediately start saying, oh, it's black. It's really inky. It never goes, it's always great. It's available. It has a hook. You put it on your pants. the very first thing you should ask is, well, do you need a pen?
Mm.
And if you do need a pen, why do you need one? How long have you been looking for one? You literally just start asking questions, because if that person doesn't need a pen, or if that person has no interest in a pen for themselves or any application for it, there's no way you're ever going to sell that pen to them.
Yeah, there's no need.
And it's there's no need. And so a lot of people, they're like, oh, I sat down with my manager and, he or she didn't want to give me more money. Well, did you paint the picture of why it would be beneficial to the manager? Because if it's not, so for example, one thing I love to say is, all right, if you're going to negotiate with a manager, there's two ways to think of a negotiation for salaries. You're either you're asking for a promotion or raise, either based on your previous 12 months of work or the next 12 months of work. A lot of people make the mistake of being retrospectively valued. You need to be forward valued. And it's the exact same way. When you take a job, you're signing a salary for the value that you're going to provide over the next 12 months. Well, the way that you can set that up then is, all right, one, come prepared with how did you perform over the last 12 months? You need to crush. If you suck at your job, you're not going to get a raise or a promotion or anything like that. So first, you do need to crush. But then you also need to think through, what additional responsibilities can I take on? And that could be potentially the lower level or the less interesting work that your manager's doing. And maybe you offer, over the next 12 months, I'd like to take that on, or I'd like to lead this project, or I'd like to kick this off. Well, all of a sudden now you did crush in the last 12 months. You've taken on more responsibility, and it's in the interest of the manager to allow you to do that. And then after they've agreed to, yes, you did do very well. Yes, I'd love for you to start doing this. Well, then at the end, that's when you propose, well, if you wouldn't mind, before we finish, I'd really like to bring up compensation. And I'd like to propose XYZ.
Absolutely. And one of the advantages of that too is to grow the skills, grow your knowledge of what your manager does, or maybe the tasks that they can offload onto you. You can take on more, you can consume more, you can try new things, and you can continue to grow, which then in return you say, okay, well, here's what I've accomplished, I've crushed it, but there's also the new things I've learned and what I can provide, which again, if you're seeing yourself as someone who provides value to the company, here's another thing that you just learned and that you can provide to the company. So hopefully you can take on that responsibility from your manager completely, which just gives you that much more of an advantage in that situation. And then you kind of turn around and sell that to the company and say, okay, this is what I've done again, and this is what I know I can do, and negotiate a better salary or a better situation for yourself.
Yeah, and I don't want people to think, oh, easy for you to say. And those are tough conversations. Like, those are never easy conversations, because that's kind of what people call, conflict or difficult conversations, et cetera. I promise you though, like, the first one is going to be totally uncomfortable. You prep as much as you want. Of course, prep with family or friends or whatever. Do yourself, record yourself, and also to numbers. You got to practice saying numbers. A lot of people fumble when they say $5,000 or $10,000 because to them they feel greedy. It's not greedy. As long as you know, I'm going to do the work, I'm going to kill it, I'm going to do really, really well next year. Sometimes practicing saying something is so important, because if you fumble through the number, it looks like a lack of self-confidence. And then and those conversations are all about presentation. How are you presenting yourself? Do you seem confident? And do you really, non-verbally resonate the fact that I am confident, I'm going to do very well, and I would like to ask more money? Because if they truly believe, all right, I can just push this person off, I'm not going to do them, I'm not going to give the raise or the promotion, whatever, they're not going anywhere. Mm-hmm. Well, that's because they don't believe that you're confident enough to actually leave and do something about it.
Yeah, I've always liked to say that it's not your boss's responsibility to make you rich. It's your responsibility, as an employeepreneur or however you want to frame this, as someone to become the expert, understand their worth, their value, and then know that, be confident in it, truly consume it, I guess, or have it be intrinsically something that they're familiar with, I guess, for lack of a better term, but they know it. They say, this is what I'm worth, this is what the value is, and I need to go into that conversation fully believing it, fully knowing it, instead of saying, well, I've done the same thing every year and now I want to make more money, because that conversation's not going to go well. But again, I think you need to as long as you have the numbers and the confidence, and it's something that's deep rooted in what you're trying to achieve in your career, and say, hey, one of the biggest things that drives me is money. And I know I've done X, Y, and Z, and I want to have a conversation about my salary or how much money I make. And you need to obviously back that up with information, but say, here's the value and here's what I think is fair based on that effort and based on those achievements. Because if you, again, like you were saying, if you go into that conversation and you don't know those numbers, it's not going to be a fun conversation. And then they're just going to laugh
No.
you off and say, hey, we'll talk about this, or hey, you didn't really accomplish a whole lot. We'll talk about it. And then we know how that conversation can go for some people.
Well, one of the things you said, it's not your boss's job. Absolutely. One of the quotes I absolutely love. So the first time I saw this, I just, one, it resonated with me, but two, it's pretty much resonated with everyone I've worked with. So it's a Jim Rohn quote, and I know I'm paraphrasing here, but it was something along the lines of, if you allow yourself to run your life based on someone else's plan, guess what they have planned for you? Not much.
Right. It's powerful.
And the first time I read that, it gave me shivers.
Yeah. I've always believed too, one of the things I've always heard as well is that when it comes to planning, especially your life, a lot of people like to think that, I'll say this is what I experienced, that I thought other people were going to, above me, management, bosses, whatever, were going to set up a plan for me. And that never came to fruition, which turned into frustration for myself. But I learned that most people don't have their own kind of life plan figured out for themselves, let alone taking the time to figure yours out for you and present that to you and say, here's what I think you can do. Here's what I would do if I were you. And I learned that, again, most times people don't have their own situation or life or goals figured out in their own career, and they're not going to have time to make it for you. And so you're going to be sitting there empty-handed.
Yeah. One of the hardest things is, so we grow up K through 12. We're told what to do, study this, take this test. You need to get this kind of a grade. And then we graduate. We go to college, assuming we go to college. And then it's the exact same thing. We're given a syllabus. We need to go through this, read these pages, study this, take the test, hopefully do well. And then you graduate. That's the breaking point for a lot of people, because we've always been told growing up. And again, the reason that our lives are so influenced by when we're kids is, psychologically, for our mind to understand something, we need to have contrast. We don't know hot if we don't know cold. We don't know right if we don't know wrong. And so for us, we always knew what the definition of success was growing up. But the moment you graduate from college, there's no longer that contrast. There's no longer the definition of success. And because people haven't taken the time to think back, and I was the same way too. I mean, this was me personally as well. Because people don't take the time to think back or sit and reflect on, what do I want from my life? Where do I want to be in 12 months? Where do I want to be in three years? Where do I want to be in 10 to 15 years? Because people haven't said, I'm sticking the stake in the ground and that's where I'm headed. People don't have that definition of success that they've set for themselves. So immediately, what do? We look around to everyone around us and compare ourselves to everyone else, which gives us the contrast that we're looking for. And then what are the natural determinants of success then? If we're judging ourselves on everyone else, how much money are we making? How big's our house? How many trips and vacations are we going on? And people get trapped. And this is where, working with the people in their 40s and 50s, it's crazy to think that doesn't stop. That doesn't go away. And then it takes people literally 10, 15, 20 years to figure out, man, I wish I had just lived life how I wanted to live it.
Yeah. And we've talked about this in previous episodes. I know I say it a lot, but we've had such great conversations on this podcast so far, but it's keeping up with the Joneses in this fallacy that whoever drives the nicest car, has the biggest house, is happy. And we know from the story you told earlier that, even if you have all the money in the world, that you still lack that fulfillment, then you're still kind of miserable. And so what I want to do then is talk about, with everything we've already talked about, I want to talk about why life goals is most important. This is, of course, one of the main topics that we want to touch on today, but Sure. Your approach is different because you were the first, maybe not the first, but you were one of the few that I talked to thus far that said, hey, let's focus on your life goals and how your career can help you get there. And so based on everything we just talked about, again, it sounds like your approach is all about life. What do you want in life? What are your goals in life? And how does your career help you get there? So how do you work with clients? And of course, what is your perspective on all of this in terms of saying, well, focus on your life, then figure out the career and how that helps you achieve what you're looking for. Because again, a lot of the messages, fix your career, better, get that better job, update your resume and get that better job. But I think your approach is unique. And so I'd like to hear your thoughts on how you came up with this and what the benefit is for our listeners.
Sure. Oh boy, that's a big question. Because it took me a long time to get to the point where I am right now, where with the understanding, with the program that I now work with people through, with my understanding of how to maximize and help someone achieve their greatest potential. So kind of the biggest problem is people self-identify with their jobs. And so because of that, they've also simultaneously split their lives in half. So a lot of people work Monday through Friday. This is who, corporate, me is, or work me is. And then on the weekends, I dump all that. I'm with my friends, I'm with my family, I'm chilling. I'm not thinking about a thing. They've literally split themselves. Who they're bringing to work is different from who they're bringing to the weekend. And the problem with that is you're constantly underperforming your greatest potential because you're not fully energized during the week because you don't actually like what you do. And you're also not fully energized on the weekend because you just had a long week, you're tired. And then on Sunday, you're thinking, oh my God, I have to work tomorrow. Okay. So it's like they're constantly under energized.
Yeah.
And so the very first thing you got to figure out is, one, realize I'm not my job. I chose this job. I chose these skills. I invested in these skills. When I think back to when I was in 5th grade, I didn't know anything about finance or accounting or anything like that. So it's like we developed who we are. And the moment that we can realize we chose to become who we are today, it also allows us to realize, all right, I'm not my job. I'm not my skills. If I choose to, I can become someone else. I can choose a different future. Now, if I don't get started today, well, when am I? When I'm 40, when I'm 45. And a lot of people start asking those tough life questions later on where they realize, oh, I should have asked that 20 years ago, 10 years ago. But the reason the life goals are so important is the moment you have a benchmark for your own life, your own determinants of success, you will naturally work towards it. And there's a difference between internal motivation and external motivation. We have been conditioned growing up by external motivation. We had coaches for sports, we had teachers, and then we had professors, we had parents, we had community leaders. We were always told what to do. So very few people have built the internal discipline to actually decide, what do I want? And I'm not trying to please anyone. I'm trying to please myself. Mm-hmm. And by pleasing yourself, you will actually become a happier, a more successful, a bigger contribution to whatever it is that you like. And naturally you will become the leader and you will help other people. So it's the moment you can figure out what you want for your life. And it may be tough. You may be thinking, and actually I had someone reach out on LinkedIn, and it was a friend that I knew from the past. And he said, all right, sweet. Follow my passion. Do you want me to quit my job and then become a professional guitar player? And I said, well, the first step would be figure out what opportunities exist in music. You have skills, you have business skills. Why not work in the music industry? Once you're in the music industry, begin to figure out, all right, how can I get closer and closer to string instruments, to working with guitars, to audio, to working with the best in the world? Like, how cool would it be if you were working with the best guitar players in the world? I mean, you love guitar. Maybe you're not that good, but you can work with those people. You can be in the environment. A lot of people, another example is sports. People are like, oh, I love sports. I'm like, all right, well, are you Michael Phelps? Are you a Tom Brady? Are you? And they have enough. I mean, they really do say, I'm not good enough. And I say, well, you're not good enough to maybe be on the team, but you can still work in the industry, in the environment, around those people. It will give you the same energy and you will naturally outperform. So one, you're going to love Monday through Friday, but because you're going to outperform and do so well, you're going to continue investing in yourself. You're going to keep building that career. You're going to outperform. You're going to make a lot more money. And then with that money, you can then do whatever else you want in your life as well. And that kind of goes into the financial freedom part.
Yeah. And it also makes you, like you said earlier, instead of having kind of your career and your life and then kind of, contrasting, situations or whatever you want to call it, it's now fused together. It's one, and you can say, hey, I love sports and this is what I do for my job and my career, and that drives you, and it's exciting, and you're passionate about it. You're going to start outperforming. You're going to start feeling alive again because you truly enjoy what you're doing. And I think that that's just such a powerful approach to people's careers, our listeners, when they're sitting there saying, I don't like what I do and I'm miserable, and they haven't probably thought about, hey, you have your passions, you have your hobbies. Are there opportunities that exist, jobs or career paths that exist in those hobbies? And again, maybe you're not going to be on the team. Maybe you're not going to be the guitar player, but you have that passion for that industry, or you have that passion for that team or whatever it might be. And just being in the team is going to excite you. And of course, a piece of that is just the realization that you're not Tom Brady, and that's okay. That doesn't mean you can't have just as much fun or excitement when it comes to helping Tom Brady or whoever it might be in that field or on that team. And I think that just comes back to the importance of saying, what do I want in life, and how, again, does my career help me get there, instead of just getting into a new job, a new career, and then having the passion behind it, because you're just going to go into that vicious cycle of, okay, this is what I thought I was going to be excited by, but now I'm not. Then, 2 years later, this is what I'm going to be excited by, then I'm not. And you do this, and people do this, and they move around jobs or companies, and then 10, 15 years later, they're still finding that passion. They're still looking for that fulfillment, and they're trying to figure out, how do I get onto that team?
Yeah. And so I'd also say one of the interesting things I found is not everybody values things the same way. So my values are very different probably from your values, and your values are different from, if you're listening to this, I guarantee your values are different from friends and family, etc. So what I found is a lot of people, when they think about what do I want for my life and career going forward, there's usually a leading variable. So maybe that's geography. I want to live in California. I need to be there. Or I want to be in a major city. Well, in that case, it's like, all right, location for you or lifestyle for you is the major variable. Well, sweet. Run with that. Start figuring out, all right, if this is where I want to be, then what's the next variable? Well, the next variable is going to be either industry or type of work that you're doing, or the mission that you're focused on, the outcome, which is what you genuinely enjoy. So it's like, you need to know, what are my most important variables? Is it location? Is it type of work? Is it prestige of company? Is it amount of money that I'm making? Is it flexibility? So you got to define your most important variables and then prioritize them, and then literally use that as a funnel.
Yeah.
To figure out, all right, this is first, second, third, fourth. And when you get those stars aligned, oh man, it's exciting. And you will want to work towards it.
Yeah.
Because for the first time, you have clarity.
Right. And it's going to drive you. This is your whole point. It's going to drive you to follow what you're looking for, to find what you're looking for, and to pursue it, and not stop and not settle for something that doesn't hit on all those priorities, or doesn't make you feel alive, or it's not completing you, it's just a job. It's just another position, but you don't care. It doesn't complete you, again, for lack of a better term. So I want to ask you, with everything you just said, for our listeners, how do they know this is going to work for me? And I know we're running up on over 50 minutes for this interview, which is awesome. There's so much good content. And
my bad.
Perfectly fine. I think we're going to have you back on, because we have so many more questions to get to, but maybe this is a good time to say, okay, let's take this last question. And I think this is a very, very important question for our listeners to hear. How do your approach is unique. Again, tackle life, figure out those priorities. And then again, how does your job, your position, the work you do, how does it help you kind of complete that puzzle and make you feel alive and passionate and fulfilled, right? And of course, with money and all that, and happiness in there as well. But how do I know this is going to work for me? How do I know this is the right approach?
Sure. So I think one big point is, the very first step is stop assuming that everyone around you has life figured it out. Stop assuming that your manager knows what's going on and they're following their dreams. Everybody wears masks. And if you know that the majority of people, they really don't know what they're doing, other than, all right, they've continued to build experience and they haven't made changes. Well, it doesn't mean that they're happy, but they're going to put on the face that they're happy. So we go into the workforce assuming that everyone above us has strategically made those decisions to be where they are in their lives. Most of them are not. So the moment you realize, everyone older than me really doesn't have it figured out, they just stayed. Well, that's when you can start to question, do I want to play the same game? And if not, all right, you need to define your own rules. And that's why the strategy works for everybody. Is it's a game that everybody's a winner if you decide to play the game. And the game is, what do I want for my life? And am I going to build it? It's kind of like when you're a kid, we're given Legos, and there's the kids who just took the Legos and they wouldn't even touch them unless they were given instructions and you're building this spaceship. And then you build the spaceship. Maybe this is just, I don't know, an example from my childhood, but whatever. But then there's like the people who just take the Legos and think of something and then just randomly start building it. Well, you built what you wanted to build. And a lot of people think that are their careers, there's one specific way to win. Move up through the corporate structure, make a lot of money and be successful. But that is like the pre-scripted design that was given to you. Those were the instructions given to you by people who did the exact same thing. It doesn't mean that it's right. It just means that that's the safe, secure, structured, step-by-step way to do something.
And I was just going to say that for some people is what they're looking for based on, again, like you said earlier, their values and what drives them, what their goals are. That's good for some people. And some people try that path and they say, this isn't for me. I want to go be the person that's building whatever the heck they want to build and feel happy with what they built, even if it maybe doesn't pay the most or whatever it might be, but they feel proud of what they built and felt in control of it.
Mm-hmm. So it's, if you're thinking through, all right, I know we've talked about a lot. If you're listening to this and you're thinking through, will this work for me? Yes, because you can choose how to live your life. And the exciting part is if you think about the last time when you were at work and someone just said, I don't care how you do it, just give me the result. You probably crushed it because that was when you could fully apply yourself and take, you probably went overtime on it. You probably delivered better than expected results. And so it's kind of like, put that at a macro scale for your entire life. The moment you say, all right, this is what I want, this is how I want to build my life. I don't know how I'm going to build it, but it's so important to me. I will figure it out. And kind of a metaphor, and I believe I'm borrowing this from Tony Robbins, but one of the examples he gives is if you had a family member in a house and that house was on fire, are you going to sit and think through every possible way to enter the house to save them? No, you're going to say, screw it. I don't know how I'm going to do it, but I'm going in the house and I'm going to save my family member. And it's because it was so important to you. You never stop you're going to go through the barriers. You're going to break through. And the moment you have that level of importance to, this is what I'm building, this is important to me, my life, my career, you'll figure it out. But you have to have the belief in yourself that I will figure it out and I'm willing to put in the time and the effort. And a lot of people let the how stop them.
And that's where the true power comes from, right? The point of all this is to feel like you're I guess in control, and that you can decide for yourself what's best, and you can be in charge, and you can be in a situation where, again, you're in control and you have the power to make change instead of letting someone else make the change for you. Because, like you said earlier, their odds are they don't have a plan for you. And that's only going to lead to misery and you saying, what am I doing? And feeling like you wasted time and feel like you could have done more if you took the reins yourself and said, you know what, I'm going to figure this out. I'm going to understand my value. I'm going to understand my worth, and I'm going to make sure that I'm in charge of my situation and I guess be the captain of your own ship, for lack of a better expression.
Yeah. And I think, so another point that kind of came to my head that I think was verification when I decided this is how I want to live my life and I'm going to build it. And a lot of the people I've worked with have had the same thing happen to them. When I left banking, I thought, oh my God, I'm letting my team down. I feel horrible. I feel like, these people are going to hate me. They're going to think I'm selfish and all these negative feelings. I got many, not one or two or three. I got many emails from people saying, good for you. And these were senior people. I was blown away.
Yeah. And
a lot of the people I've worked with too, when they left their companies to go, all right, because they literally told their managers, I'm not leaving because of you. I'm not leaving because of the company. I now know what I want and I'm going to get it. I have the offer. I'm going. More often than not, the managers, of course, selfishly in that interest, again, self-interest. Yes, it's going to be painful for them because they have to change. They got to go find somebody. They have to do the interviews. But more often than not, there's a lot of people that say, man, good for you.
And I was in that same situation. I will attest to that. I experienced the same thing because I think that in this world, and our listeners could be facing this, in their own career, in their own life, but they see someone saying, hey, I'm taking charge. I know what I want to do, or at least explore more options. And it looks like they're alive. It looks like that person's finally alive and they're not the zombie anymore. And the people around you in the office see that and they get excited. They say, That's awesome. And they get excited by your excitement, which again,
energy's intoxicating.
that's absolutely true. And it's just it's cool to feel. And selfishly, I'll just say it was awesome. It was great for management and my peers to recognize that, hey, I'm excited about what I want to do next in my own career. And I think that hopefully other people listening can build on that and understand the power behind it, and really how they can also help people around them in their own job, in their own career, and say, hey, I'm going to make this change. This is what I want to accomplish. And, that can feed into those people around them that they care about and work with every day, because they don't want to see them be that zombie either.
Yes. I mean, you absolutely nailed it. So there's the reason most people don't change is fear. And there's two ways to live life. You either live life afraid of something, and a lot of people will use justification, or they'll come up with excuses. Well, all right, well, if I quit this, I'm going to lose this money. Or I spent 5 years to get there. All right, are you going to let your past determine your future for the rest of your life? No, or at least you shouldn't. So there's fear, and then there's courage. The reason most people don't pursue what they want is the fear stopping them. What's wild is when you're the person that steps up and does something that does require courage, and everyone's like, oh my God, I can't believe you're doing that. When you do it, all of a sudden other people start reflecting on their lives and making decisions, and literally you start inspiring other people. So one, you feel energized because you feel good about the decision, and you feel incredible because you then just inspired a lot of other people to start taking action in their lives. It's a double benefit.
And that's what I would say is when you become a real leader in life, in a company. So I think that's a perfect way, I think, to cap this entire episode off. I will tell you, we are just over an hour, I think. Jamie, I know we had so much more to talk about, but that's awesome. There was so much value in here. And again, I think we're going to have you back on, because we have so many more questions to ask that we just didn't get to, and that's perfectly okay, of course. So I just want to kind of wrap this up a little bit and say, hey, of course, obviously, thank you for being on. Thank you for providing so much value and insight for our listeners. And I want to give you the floor for a minute, because I am excited by this conversation. I know our listeners are going to be excited by this conversation. And I was excited when I first talked to you and learned about your approach. So again, I want to give you the floor and just say, hey, tell us a little bit again about your business, about you and how you work with your clients, and how you can help our listeners potentially, if they're looking to reach out to you, how they can, of course, find you, but how you can help them through the services you provide.
Sure. And so before I jump into kind of where they can find me and all that, I want to bring one point back to, if there's one thing that I could hopefully leave with you, whoever's listening, I mean, where you are in your life, I don't know, but the single biggest thing is start questioning, what do I believe and why do I believe it? What do I value? Why do I value it? And who am I? And in terms of the self-identity question, in order to free yourself and actually become someone else, to do something else, you need to realize that who I am right now is this giant aggregate sum total of everything I've experienced in the past. And of course, there's going to be the nature versus nurture. We're 25% genetics, 75% environment. At least that's what a lot of people debate. So the moment you can start to realize, all right, I think the way that I think because of where I've been in the past, you can start to detach yourself from your job. The moment you detach yourself from your job, you can start thinking, where do I want to go next? Who am I becoming? Where am I going? And that is such a great question. And it's also the scariest part, because when you feel like you're changing your identity, and identity is nothing more of how you perceive yourself. When you look in the mirror, what do you think about yourself? What do you believe about yourself? What do you know that you value? When you start changing that, it's scary, because you start doubting and you believe that, well, other people don't think that about me. So if they don't think that about me, I must not be that. So start rebuilding your identity and become that person. And the way that you become it is you build slowly every single day. If you see yourself slimmer, start doing what you need to do to become slimmer. If you see yourself as an expert in, X subject matter, well, start reading the books, start building that identity. You can become who you want to become. So that's the biggest point, is most people don't do what they want in their lives or careers because they don't see themselves as that type of person. They're stuck to identity. Identity changes. you can change your identity going forward. All right, so I'll leave you with that.
Well, let me just say, not to cut you off again. It's just powerful because it gives our listeners a glimpse into what's possible. And all those people out there that are listening that are saying, I'm never going to be what I want to be. I'm never going to do what I want to do. I'm never going to find the happiness, the fulfillment, the financial security, which is what we talk about a lot. I'm never going to find that. This is just what I'm destined to be. This is what I'm sitting here, I'm doing. It's not going to change. And everything you just said says, nope, it's all possible. Obviously, just change everything about how you identify yourself, change everything about how you believe, change your perspective, change what you know, your skills, everything. Everything is on the table. And if you make the changes, you're going to make change. And I'm confident that our listeners are going to find what they're looking for and truly become happy with what they do in their career.
Scariest part of my life was leaving finance. Because I viewed myself as I am the finance guy. The moment I left, I was literally asking myself questions. Oh my God, who am I? What am I about? What do I want to do with my life? So I know how hard that personally is. So in terms of where people can find me, you can go on www.redstonecoaching.com. That's my website. And also too, a lot of people, I kind of view people in two ways. Some people literally just need direction. They just need to know where to go. And they are the do-it-yourselfers. They are like, boom, I'm steamrolling by myself. Awesome. I have a free trial on my website. You can go in there. The first part of my program I have for free because I want you to have that direction. So I have that complete for free on there. And then if, let's say that you do go through that free trial program and you realize, okay, I think I want to work with him. I want to keep moving step by step with him. Awesome. Then at that point, we'll do a one-on-one call. I'll get to meet you. We'll talk about what do you want, how I can help, and how we're going to get there. And then at the end of the day, if I can serve you, and you believe that I'm the right person to serve you, awesome. Let's make it happen.
Fantastic. And I'll make sure that, of course, where people can find you, your website, everything for our listeners, it's all going to be in the show notes. So, don't have to worry about remembering Jamie's name or first name or last name. I'll make sure everything is in the show notes for our listeners so they can find you and reach out to you. And I highly recommend that they do because, again, I was excited by your enthusiasm. I was excited by your approach and the different perspective that you had. And I think it's just a great opportunity for our listeners to reach out and connect to you and even ask you some questions to see how they could work with you and change their situation. And of course, I like to say expedite the process from going to, point A to point B, being unhappy, unfulfilled, miserable, whatever it might be, lacking the financial security they're looking for, to getting all three of them, the happiness, fulfillment, and financial security that we talk about on this podcast. So, Jamie, again, with all that said, I appreciate everything that you shared with us. I appreciate you being on this episode. I appreciate our listeners tuning in. And of course, like I said, I hope they reach out to you and learn some nuggets from you and connect with you and possibly work with you. So one more time, thanks to Jamie for being on. Thanks for everybody for tuning in. And as always, I will catch you guys on the next episode of the Take Back Your Career podcast. Take care.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of the Take Back Your Career podcast with your host, Adam Fullerton, the podcast dedicated to giving you expert advice and actionable ideas so that you can achieve real results and finally take back your career. Like what you heard in today's episode? Consider leaving a 5-star review and visiting takebackyourcareerpodcast.com, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, or Spotify for more episodes. And remember, Mondays shouldn't suck, and neither should finding help. Thanks for listening to Take Back Your Career podcast.